Propaganda. The CIA's techniques of planting fake stories in the news. They stage fake news, stage fake stories. False flag events is a favorite term used by a lot of the journalists that are covering the manipulative, faked propaganda of people such as the Julian Assange story and David Icke's, Alex Jones, and this Hildeberg or Hildebrand or whatever, Anthony Hildebrand, whatever his name is there from the UK. You've got vast amounts of propaganda that's being deployed and weaponized against the people of the United States, all at the very same time as the gangster banksters of the Federal Reserve allow their buddies and their cronies to waltz off with trillions. There is no question at all that the Bushes and the Clintons and the Obamas and Halder and Schneiderman and Loretta Lynch, Jeff Sessions, James Comey, Robert Mueller, and the list is nearly endless. All their little pals engaged in these financial fraud schemes, swirling like a toilet around the subprime predatory mortgages, all these derivatives, this market for exotic financial products, the banking debacle, the banking scandal of the 1970s and 80s, the savings and loan and banking scandal. It goes back to the late 1800s. It struck again just before World War I. It struck again during the early 1920s. The Roaring '20s were built on nothing but printed money when they brought the Federal Reserve in the 1917 period. Let's see, then they had Black Thursday, Black Friday there, the so-called Great Depression struck, and there's been a cycle of boom and bust. The bubbles in real estate are inflated, and then the bubbles in real estate collapse. All through the 50s, the 60s, right after World War II, by the way, immediately after the cessation of the primary hostilities of World War II, there was a great big bubble that began to be inflated. Let's see, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, everybody knows the current story, how the massive amounts of shin plaster, the script, the bills of credit, the Imagineered, printed right up out of thin air. They print the currency from thin air. Trillions of reserve notes waltzed off with the Clintons, the Bushes, the Obamas. Maxine Waters there, Dianne Feinstein, excuse me, Chucky Schumer, Andrew Cuomo, Kevin Brady from Conroe, Texas. The list just goes on and on and on of the highly placed government representatives and government agents that participated in the massive real estate scheming and scamming, including Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren made a small fortune there, wheeling and dealing in foreclosures. So, ladies and gentlemen, Julian Assange, an accused rapist of a 16-year-old girl, that's what his charges are. He supposedly had sex with an underage girl. You wouldn't do something like that, would you, Julian? That's only stuff that Jeffrey Epstein and Bill Clinton and Donald Trump and all these other wealthy and powerful men. That's what they do, right? Hillary Clinton can tell you. Anthony Hilder can tell you, right? Come on, Anthony Hilder, chime in here with David Ikes or Ickes or whatever Alex Jones' pal is there. And, well, I guess Julian Assange's arrest. The reason for this video, and I'm going to cut it short, is real simple. This isn't propaganda, folks. This is a case in the United States District Court in Tennessee. This is where the exposure of these massive real estate-based subprime predatory mortgages, this massive, unbelievable financial swindling that's rocked the markets of the United States, is being exposed on steroids. You see, ladies and gentlemen, they can't rob the system without suckering and luring into the schemes the would-be real estate owners, the would-be homeowners, the would-be borrowers, the people that are used with their credit scores to write all these subprime loans. You can't write a subprime predatory loan without baiting and luring into the game the consumers, the public. The public is an essential element of the racketeering scheme. The racketeering scheme directly involves the luring and baiting of the consuming public into these rackets. That's part of the racketeering scheme. You can't do it without the pigeons. I hope this, I hope this is making sense to you people. Wake up. You can't do hundreds of thousands, even millions of these predatory subprime loans. You can't do it unless you lure and bait and reel in. You got to reel them in, the consumers. They're essential to the racketeering scheme. So anybody that got reeled in is a potential plaintiff against these racketeers. Anthony Hilder, Julian Assange. You see, they're running all this, well, they don't call it the dark web. They call it the deep state. They run the deep state with vast profits from these financial schemes. This is how they buy elections. This is how they buy judges. This is how they buy prosecutors, buy the police, buy the FBI, buy Robert Mueller. They buy Jimmy Comey. They bought the Clintons. They bought the Bushes. They bought the Obamas. Where do you think the money comes from? How do they buy the system? Ask Gretchen Morgensen and her co-author, Mr. Roshner, of Reckless Endangerment. Ask Bill Moyers. Ask Fox News. Ask NBC News. I don't know. Ask Donald J. Trump. How do they buy the system, Mr. Real Estate Developer? You see, Donald Trump, he's just a real estate speculator and a developer of sorts with some construction interests. He was doing business with Adnan Khashoggi, Mr. Gabanafar, and you betcha he was doing business with the Bin Ladens. See, Donald J. Trump was doing business with the Triad Development Corporation all over the United States and all over the world. In fact, I'll be willing to bet that Donald J. Trump learned quite a few of his tricks from the Triad Development Gang and the LDS Mormon Church. How about that? Up there in Salt Lake City, right, Donald J. Trump? Aren't they slick? Boy, that Mormon LDS Church, they're a bunch of real estate speculators and real estate developers and financiers there with their financial interests in what? Bain Capital? Bain Capital and Zion's Bank? Far West Bank? Well, ladies and gentlemen, you see, when it comes to actually fighting these people in federal courts, when it comes to actually fighting in the federal courts to expose how the essential element of these bank looting, mortgage system swindling, foreclosure fraud schemes, these predatory subprime financial rackets that have been massively perpetrated against the American people, you can't do any of it without the pigeons, the consuming public. You've got to lure and bait into these schemes the public, or your massive, never before seen in human history financial racketeering schemes, they just won't work. You got to have the dummies, the sheeple. You got to have the pigeons to make it all function. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave it right there. Look at all the links below and educate yourself. Anthony Hilder, Alex Jones, Julian Assange, David Icke's, they're not going to explain to you this massive financial dog and pony show, this gargantuan financial, monetary smoke and mirrors game. They're going to plant fake stories in the media to keep you all full of propaganda. Julian Assange, dude, you don't impress me. You impress me even less than Alex Jones. And then there's, of course, David Icke, and then Anthony Hildebrand. Oh, Anthony, he's got everybody razzle-dazzled in the UK these days with Brexit. The king and queen there, the royal family of Holland, the Dutch, Luxembourg, and that whole bunch of goofballs, and the royal family of, the House of Windsor? Who you working for, Hildebrand? The House of Windsor or MI6? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. We'll definitely, positively, we will be back.